Thank you, Mr Speaker. This MPI today is about safety and crime prevention. So I'm going to begin by asking people to imagine a young police detective, maybe on a drug squad in a big city. Let's say, for argument's sake, Brisbane. He spends every day making the community safer. He's making a makes a drug bust. So when he makes a drug bust, the assets are confiscated. The vile assets derived from the misery inflicted on victims and their families. These assets that are confiscated are then used for law enforcement and drug treatment and crime prevention. These funds are designed to prevent further misery being inflicted on families, further families being destroyed. So if you're this young police detective, maybe from Brisbane, what would you be feeling if you hear about a minister in Canberra cutting funding to deserving projects, and using those cuts to fund projects that his own independent experts score at less than 50%? His own independent experts say aren't eligible funding. Maybe you think about, why is this minister making the community less safe than it could be? So I do wonder what a young detective Dutton would think about a disgraced Minister for Home Affairs, Dutton. And that's what we're debating today, Mr Deputy Speaker, because there's a lot of heat and light in this debate. So let's go to some facts. This is a $17.9 million program to make communities safer. The department and independent crime experts ranked the applications and recommended the top 70 be approved. What happened? The minister rejects those recommendations and slashes $5.6 million from the best projects to fund an additional 55 projects. 55 projects. And where were the applications cut, Mr Deputy Speaker? 3/4 of the projects that were cut were in Labor seats or safe coalition seats. So I do wonder about how the members feel opposite who inflicted these cuts. The member for New England, who saw a halving of the program funding for Inverell, for example. That is the state of these cuts. And who were the beneficiaries of the minister's remarkable intervention? There were 2 projects announced during the Braddon by-election worth $200,000. 2 projects that we heard about during question time that were announced before the guidelines were even written. Announced before the guidelines were even written. Announced before applications were open. Imagine if you're the lucky councils down in Braddon. You just get given money that you haven't even applied for. That's a good trick. I'd love someone to teach me about that. And these are 2 projects that the department subsequently made clear to the minister were unsuitable and ineligible. Unsuitable and ineligible. The 2 projects did not meet the guideline requirements of having scored above 50% in all 3 merit criterions. And the guidelines make it very clear that if a project fails the 50% test, it is ineligible for funding. So again, the Prime Minister was being very murky today when he claimed that the guidelines were being followed, because the guidelines are very clear that if they're below 50%, they are ineligible. So that's what the Minister for Home Affairs did. The minister who prides himself on being Mr Law and Order, a minister who breached the program guidelines and funds 2 ineligible projects he announced before the program began in a vain effort to win the by-elections. And to rub salt into the wounds of taxpayers, the minister spent $36,000 on a VIP RAF jet to make the announcement. Now, the official explanation from the minister's office is that he travelled down to Wynyard for a citizenship ceremony. What lucky new citizens they are to get the minister's message from the minister himself. If I was being mean, I'd say they might reconsider being Australian citizens if that was their first impression of Australian citizenship. So the story goes from the minister's office. He was down for the citizenship ceremony, spent $36,000 of taxpayers' money to do it, and he had a spare hour spare. He had an hour spare in Wynyard. Now a normal person might say, I've got an hour between functions, I might go and have a coffee. I might inject $5 into the local Wynyard economy, but not this minister. This minister's decided to inject $200,000 into the local economy through 2 grants that are clearly in breach of the guidelines. And what's worse is the $36,000 RAF jets is equivalent to 20% of the actual worth of the grants. 20%. So maybe if he jumped on a Virgin or Qantas flight, he could have given a bit more money to Braddon. And who were the other beneficiaries of the minister's cuts to the best projects, the most meritorious projects? There were 53 other projects much lower ranked. And coincidentally, over 50% of the funding went to marginal seats, over 50%. And 3/4 of the funding went to coalition seats, despite the coalition holding less than 50% of the seats in Parliament at that time. Now, the minister, in a vain and very belated attempt to defend his actions, claims he simply cut funding from the 19 projects to spread the money across other deserving projects. That's his public reasoning. Now, that would make some sense. That would have some semblance of truth to it if he just picked the next 53 projects in the rankings from the department. But no, he didn't do that. He picked and chose all through the list of 210 projects, including literally the last ranked project, number 210. This minister, let's be very clear, chose much lower ranked projects for pure political advantage. Pure political advantage. This minister chose lesser projects, projects less worthy, projects that would contribute less to community safety for petty political advantage. He put his political advantage ahead of community safety, and that's a shameful, shameful act. And then the second chapter in this affair is his grant to the National Retail Association. A National Retail Association that happened to make a $6,500 donation to the minister. So, Deirdre Chambers, what a coincidence. And what does the minister do in the same year he receives a $6,500 donation from the National Retail Association? He instructs his department to design a program specifically to deliver not 100 grants, not 10 grants, one grant. One grant, coincidentally, to the National Retail Association for almost $1 million. Almost $1 million. And it's a great ROI. I would love that. I would love a grant program that delivered to one person, being me. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, to layer another level of coincidence on this, 1 week after the National Retail Association pays $1,500 to have lunch with the minister, and what a lucky lunch that must have been, the minister then instructs his department to expedite the grant design. Have dinner where $1,500 is handed over. A week later, coincidentally, the minister instructs his department to get a hurry on designing the program. Now, if there's ever a poster child for the need for a National Integrity Commission, this sorry saga is it. And again, the Prime Minister, first of all, didn't even know what this rort was. He used lines from another rort to try and defend the minister's actions and couldn't answer any questions about whether ministerial code of conduct was breached. Just 4 numbers go to the heart of this entire saga: 80, 71, 50, 100. 80, 71, 50, 100. 80% of cuts to the best projects were in safe coalition or Labor seats. 71% of the new lower-ranked projects that received funding were in coalition seats, and over 50% of the funding went to marginal seats, and 100% of the ineligible projects that were funded were in marginal seats. Shame. So we're seeing from this government rort after rort after rort. We saw sports rorts with $500,000 going to Mossman rowers. We've seen the community development grant where 75% of funding went to community seats. We saw the $150 million female facilities and regional water safety program that's designed to spend money in the regions where only 10% of the money went to the regions, and the biggest project, $10 million to the North Sydney pool. $10 million to the North Sydney pool. Now, some people listening out there might say, well, this is what all governments do. That's what all governments do. There's nothing to see here. This is standard operating procedures. But let's be very clear here. The minister used money derived from human misery, of drugs, of murder, of armed robbery, confiscated by our brave police men and women that was supposed to prevent further crime. He used that money to win votes in marginal seats. He used that money to win votes in marginal seats. And this is the standard this government is setting. As General David Morrison said, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. And that is the standard that the Prime Minister and the Minister for Home Affairs has set, using money derived from the human misery of drugs and crime and prostitution to win votes in marginal seats. This is what this debate is about. They'll try and spin it and say no law was broken, but what about ethics? What about morality? That was what was broken under this program.